In 1981, the United States Federal Communications Commission, under the presidency of Ronald Reagan, ruled that children's television should be dictated by marketplace concerns, as opposed to things like whether a TV show is educational or good for a kid's health. You know, woke stuff probably. This led to a swathe of shows like He-Man, G.I. Joe, and Transformers that were specifically designed to serve as half-hour toy commercials. Children, particularly boys, were being marketed to more targetedly and aggressively than ever before. And it worked. It was so effective, in fact, that those children are now 40 and 50-somethings and still buying Masters of the Universe toys in the year of our Lord 2025. But for us younger millennials, I'm so young and virile. I totally didn't find my first grey hair recently. We younger millennials were stricken with two different manias, namely Turtle Mania and Bat Mania. 1987's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles took the merchandise-driven cartoon format of He-Man and took it to its logical extreme, transforming an obscure indie comic about anthropomorphic, deadly weapon-wielding, Frank Miller parodying, not-so-radical reptiles into a multimedia empire, shifting $1.1 billion worth of toys in its first 4 years. Meanwhile, 1989's Batman movie became a merchandising juggernaut, putting a bat symbol t-shirt on every man, woman and child in the Western Hemisphere. Okay, that's a slight exaggeration, but only slight. So how did all of these things lay the groundwork for the superhero cartoon revolution of the 1990s? Well, that's what this whole video's about, you know. I kind of thought that would be obvious from the title, you know. Anyway, hey heroes, I'm Josh from Panels to Pixels, and this is the golden age of superhero cartoons. I almost forgot what the video title was. In the wake of Tim Burton's Batman, and with its sequel Batman Returns about to hit cinemas, Warner Brothers higher-ups sat around in their little water tower, cooking up ways to ride the wave of Batmania. Artist and animator Bruce Timm had sharpened his teeth on the aforementioned half-hour toy commercials like He-Man and the Masters of the Universe and G.I. Joe, but he had established himself at Warner by working on the hugely popular Tiny Toon Adventures. And it was there that he met producer Eric Radomski, and the two were tasked with designing a Batman cartoon that would trade on the character's newfound cinematic success. Burton's movie had established a much more mature tone, emphasizing the dark aspect of The Dark Knight, and the animated series would certainly follow suit. But where the film's aesthetic was inspired by 80s comics like Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns and Alan Moore and Brian Boland's The Killing Joke, Batman the Animated Series took greater influence from Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams' character-defining comics of the 1970s. In addition to this, Timm and Radomski looked to the Fleischer-produced Superman cartoon of the 1940s for its Art Deco backgrounds and broad-chested character designs. And so, with the look of the show clearly defined and bolstered by an unusually large animation budget for a Saturday morning kids cartoon, Timm and Radomski were joined by writer-producers Paul Dini and Alan Burnett to tell Batman's story. The series follows Bruce Wayne as his nocturnal nom de guerre on a crusade against crime with the support of his faithful butler Alfred, the Dick Grayson version of Robin, although dressed more like the Tim Drake version, and Barbara Gordon as Batgirl. And one of the things that sets the show, and indeed Batman, apart from other superhero outings is the focus on street-level crime and the noir influence that had underpinned the comics since the character's inception. Which isn't to say that there isn't some ooky spooky supernatural stuff thrown in there, and those tend to be my favourite episodes. I'm an ooky spooky goth boy, what can I say? Like for example the September 6, 1992 series premiere On Leather Wings, which introduced Man-Bat. Oh, I love Man-Bat. Or the fan favourite two-parter Feet of Clay, which features Clayface and some of the best 2D animation ever seen on the small screen, even to today. Although the show wasn't serialised, the 85-episode run, along with its continuation as the new Batman Adventures for a further 24 episodes, provides a sense of character development. There's an arc to the whole thing. And this is all underpinned by the voice talents of Kevin Conroy, who for many has become the quintessential voice for the Caped Crusader. We get to see every aspect of Bruce Wayne over the course of the show. We see his loves, his losses, his hope, his grief. We get to see Batman as a force for good and as something that strikes fear in the hearts of guilty men. Speaking of which, The Dark Knight has long been famed for having one of the best rose galleries in comics, and they are on full display here. In one of my favourite episodes, titled Almost Got Him, we get to see heavy hitters the Joker, the Penguin, Two-Face, Poison Ivy, and Killer Croc trading war stories over a game of poker. And then of course there's the Emmy award-winning Heart of Ice, which single-handedly transformed Z-list character Mr. Freeze into one of the all-time great Batman foes. But you know, we can't talk about the villains of Batman the Animated Series without talking about Mark Hamill's turn as the Joker. Who would have thought that Luke Skywalker would deliver one of the most iconic villain performances in animation history? Hamill meets the high bar set by Conroy, providing the yin to Batman's yang, and proving Joker to be the Caped Crusader's unequivocal arch nemesis. Not without a little help though, as the series also introduced Joker's love interest and right-hand woman, Harley Quinn, as played and partly based on actress-comedian Arlene Sorkin. Thanks to episodes like Joker's Favour and the new Batman Adventures Mad Love, Quinn became an instant fan favourite, and her legacy has arguably outgrown the show for which she was created. It goes without saying that this 90s Batman cartoon was a huge hit with both kids and nerdy adults alike, and its influence was soon felt across other shows. Even in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which was already in its 6th season by the time Batman started airing. Later seasons of TMNT are marked by their dark red sky and brooding heroes, de-emphasizing the fun-loving party dude personas that had made the show such a hit. The shadow of Batman the Animated Series looms large, and certainly you're going to see it hanging over the other shows that we're going to talk about in this video. Not to mention the fact that it spawned the entire DC animated universe, featuring hit shows like Superman, Batman Beyond, Justice League, and a host of feature-length movies. To put it simply, Batman is the best to ever do it, and is still held up as one of the greatest superhero adaptations of all time, and with good reason.
The most popular comic book in the world today is coming to life. Don't miss the premiere of X-Men Saturday, October 24th on Fox.
I don't know what that was. So that was Jack Black doing the X-Men thing. Look, I've talked about 1992's X-Men cartoon a bunch of times here on Panels to Pixels, most notably how the show's serialized storytelling broke new ground for children's TV and laid the groundwork for the eventual Marvel Cinematic Universe. But for this video, I'm going to try and come at X-Men from a slightly different angle. Debuting in October 1992, the show ran for 76 episodes across 5 seasons. And if I could use one word to describe the 90s X-Men cartoon, it would be balanced. The show perfectly balances its cast, the wide and varied personalities of its heroes. It counterweights melodrama with levity, and combines the all-out action that I craved as a young boy with the themes and messaging that I probably needed as a young boy.
So often in our history, unhappy, misguided people have created scapegoats, blaming those that are different for the problems in their own lives.
It is an evil in men's hearts that must be fought.
Even the costumes, pulled directly from contemporaneous Jim Lee comics, felt modern for the time, and yet totally timeless. That's balance. Everything about this show feels pretty timeless, to be honest. Well, okay, there are some very late 80s/early 90s music cues. You know those Korg M1 electric piano keyboard sounds that are on every record and soundtrack from the early 90s.
I'll avenge you, my friend. I swear it.
One of the great strengths of X-Men the Animated Series is the way in which it took 30 years of convoluted comic book continuity and streamlined it into the most efficient and easily consumable version of these stories. And I'm not saying that it's better than the comics necessarily, but it knows exactly what to adapt and what to leave on the page. It's all killer, no filler. X-Men comics, meanwhile, were more popular than ever, and the show was quick to adapt new stories, even developing some stuff in parallel with the comics, such as the 2-part One Man's Worth, which aired the same year as the comic storyline Age of Apocalypse. The 2 stories appear to have germinated from the same idea, i.e. someone going back in time to kill Charles Xavier before he could start the X-Men, leading to Magneto forming the team and an alternate future with new takes on familiar characters. But it's fascinating to see the parallel development of the comic and the show take these ideas in radically different directions. I think we're all still dealing with the collective trauma of the pandemic and national lockdowns, and I don't want to make light of any of that, but if there was one good thing to come out of it for me, it was the launch of Disney Plus in the UK in March 2020. My God, did they nail the timing of that. And the first thing I did was binge watch all of X-Men the Animated Series in just a couple of weeks. It's honestly one of my happiest memories of that first lockdown. Well, that and my wife got really into making margaritas. But the good news is now there's even more to enjoy. Episodes of X-Men, that is, not margaritas. As in 2024, Marvel Animation Studios premiered X-Men 97, a revival and direct continuation of the 90s cartoon, which is arguably even better than the original. And I honestly never thought I would say that, but X-Men 97 is just that good. Alright, let's shift gears slightly, with the first of a few anthropomorphic animal cartoons that we're going to talk about in this video. A mold first cast by the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and a trend that I have to imagine spawned a whole generation of furries, especially the biker mice from Mars. Premiering in 1993, the show follows 3 mice from Mars who ride motorbikes. It's pretty self-explanatory, right?
You were expecting turtles, maybe?
Throttle is the cool-headed and cool-haired leader of the group, with his leather jacket, shades, and James Dean quiff. Modo is the tank, towering over the others with his very 90s cyborg arm and left eye, but really he's a big softie. And Vinny is the loose unit of the trio, a slightly unhinged thrill-seeker who loves riding fast and blowing stuff up. Forced to flee their home planet to escape the Plutarchians, a race of fish-like aliens who were plundering Mars for its natural resources, the biker mice find themselves on Earth. More specifically in Chicago, where they meet their very own April O'Neil in mechanic Charlie Davidson. Get it? Like Harley Davidson? While on Earth, the radical rodents uncover the plot of Lawrence Limburger, a Plutarchian disguised as one of Chicago's most successful businessmen, who plans to drain Earth's resources just as the Plutarchians did on Mars. And so the biker mice from Mars, along with their newfound human ally Charlie, dedicate themselves to stopping the evil Limburger and his co-conspirators, Dr. Carbuncle and the oafish Grease Pit. Where Biker Mice does a great job in establishing its own identity outside of being another Ninja Turtles copycat is by leaning harder into its sci-fi setting and aesthetic. The Biker Mice aren't surfer party dudes, they are hardened freedom fighters, although that doesn't preclude them from enjoying the odd hot dog from time to time. Meanwhile, the show presents Chicago as a crumbling dystopia, lorded over by Limburger in his monolithic headquarters. The very first episode sees Throttle, Modo, and Vinny going up against the X-Terminator, a parody, of course, of The Terminator, complete with obligatory Arnold impression. That was not my best Arnold impression. There's also a kind of anime look to everything, and a lot of the cartoons we're going to talk about are influenced by anime because that was the hip thing in the early 90s. In Biker Mice from Mars, there's no shortage of cyberpunk techno weapons and big energy blast explosions. And that's to say nothing of Vinny's decidedly Akira-inspired motorbike. Finish it all off with a score of syrupy synths and hair metal riffs, and Biker Mice from Mars ends up being a total vibe, way better than it has any right to be. You know, I've talked in the past about how I was just a few years too young for Turtle Mania. They were definitely around. I had some of the toys and remnants of memorabilia that had been passed down to me by older siblings. But when it came to selecting my personal TMNT substitute, I skipped past the Biker Mice and went straight to the next cartoon that I'm going to talk about, Street Sharks. They bite, they fight, the Street Sharks. When it comes to ripping off the Ninja Turtles, few cartoons did it more brazenly than the story of 4 brothers who are transformed into half-human, half-shark crime fighters who love extreme sports and fast food. Jawsome. And look, cards on the table, I know this is probably the weakest, most unoriginal, and most nakedly designed to sell toys entry on this list, but at the same time, it might be the show to which I have the most nostalgic attachment. Produced by Deke Productions and airing from 1994 to 1997, Street Sharks follows the adventures of the aforementioned Bolton brothers, John, Clint, Bobby, and Coop, who, thanks to the evil Dr. Paradigm and his Gene Slammer device, become Ripster, Jab, Streaks, and Big Slamoo. Each episode, Dr. Paradigm, nicknamed Dr. Paranoid after fusing his own DNA with that of a piranha, creates some new aquatic animal-human hybrid with a painfully punny name, and the Street Sharks must battle them to save the good citizens of Fishin' City. Get it? Like nuclear fission, but also fishing? That's the level that this show is operating on, so if you're rolling your eyes at this point, it might be best to go back to watching Batman. Despite their Cronenbergian transformations, the Bolton boys are remarkably unfazed by their new aquatic alter egos. In fact, becoming humongous, muscle-bound, reverse mermen seems only to bolster their self-confidence somehow. So don't expect any Hulk-like pathos or X-Men-style metaphors for being othered in society here. What you do get though is big shark dudes with super strength who can eat through any material and swim through concrete. These guys do so much property damage, it's insane. Anyone would think that the villain of the show is public infrastructure. Continuing down the line of TMNT parallels, Dr. Paranoid is your Shredder surrogate, obviously, except he's vaguely European, just so you know that he's properly evil. His two main lackeys, Slobster and Slash, share their dynamic and comedic incompetence with Bebop and Rocksteady. Instead of April O'Neil, you have friendly scientist Lena, while the Casey Jones role is filled by Benz, possibly the most 90s character ever conceived. He's up there with Sketch Turner and Adam X the Extreme. Even for me, this is too much 90s. Unlike the Turtles though, I feel like this show doesn't do a great job at defining the sharks' distinct personalities. Ripster is ostensibly the leader, and Big Slamu is the tank, and that's about it. They're all party dudes, they all love science and extreme sports, and hate pizza in equal measure. And that speaks to the prevailing feeling I have when watching this show, that they just didn't put much thought or care into it. Like for example, Dr. Paradigm is transformed into Dr. Paranoid in episode 2, and it's like both of those names are as dumb and fake sounding as each other, so why even bother calling him Dr. Paradigm in the first place? There's all these little narrative and logical inconsistencies that don't really bother me in a CinemaSins kind of way, but definitely speak to a lack of forethought on behalf of Street Shark's producers. And that's to say nothing of the cheap, janky animation, which just pales in comparison to some of the other shows featured in this video. In the first episode, the recurring, exposition-dumping helicopter news reporter refers to the inhabitants of Fishin City as fisters, and I just think somebody should have picked up on that. Fisting was a thing 30 years ago, right? Despite all of this, there is a very 90s allure to Street Sharks, and I just can't help but be charmed by it. I don't know if it's the maximalist, colour theory be damned, explosion in a surf shop aesthetic of it all, or the fact that I did then, and still do now, just think that sharks are cool. And let's be real, the toys, which were bigger, meaner, and more ostentatious than the Ninja Turtles, were a huge part of the appeal for me as a kid. And that was really the point. The show was a vehicle to sell toys. Joe Galliani, a designer at Mattel, was inspired to create the Street Sharks after calling local libraries and finding out which books were most popular with boys. The answer? Shark books. They were always loaned out. Plenty of books on the shelves about turtles and mice though. Street Sharks ran, inexplicably, for 40 episodes across 3 seasons. And by the end, you can definitely tell that the concept was wearing thin. The show's producers tried to refresh things by sending the sharks to space, and then back in time to team up with the Dino Vengers. I guess you could say that the show jumped the shark. Hey, come on, boo you! But the candle that burns twice as bright burns half as long, and what Street Sharks lacked in staying power, I think it stands as a distillation of everything that was cool in the mid-90s, and the logical endpoint of the wave of anthropomorphic animal cartoons kicked off by Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And hey, I managed to do this whole thing about Street Sharks without once bringing up Vin Diesel. Cliché avoided, good for me.
Street Sharks? I like it. I like it!
1,000 years ago, superstition and the sword ruled. It was a time of darkness.
In a lot of ways, Gargoyles is the platonic ideal of the 90s action cartoon. You've got the anthropomorphic heroes with their distinct but equally lovable personalities, a la the Ninja Turtles. You've got the gothic aesthetic and moody moonlit city setting of Batman the Animated Series. And then you pepper in some of the social commentary and elevated writing of X-Men. And all of this is presented with a level of polish afforded only to the House of Mouse. Gargoyles certainly feels like a Disney product of the mid-90s, riding high on box office success during the so-called Disney Renaissance. Indeed, the show's creator and producer Greg Weisman told Sci-Fi in 2018 that an early screening of Beauty and the Beast shaped the creation of the Gargoyles' leader Goliath and his relationship with Elisa Marza. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Gargoyles premiered in October 1994 and ran across 3 seasons until February 1997. The show consists of 78 half-hour episodes, the first 2 seasons of which aired as part of the Disney Afternoon programming block. Known for beloved funny animal cartoons like DuckTales, Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers, Tailspin, Darkwing Duck, and Goof Troop, Gargoyles was a bit of a departure for Walt Disney television animation, and it marks a trend towards those darker, edgier, smarter superhero cartoons of the 90s. To put it another way, Disney saw the success of Batman the Animated Series and said, yeah, we'll have a slice of that, please and thanks. Gargoyles follows a group of nocturnal creatures who turn to stone during the day and awake at night to protect a Scottish castle in the year 994. But after a betrayal befitting a Shakespearean tragedy, the Gargoyles' home is sieged and our heroes are cursed to sleep for 1,000 years, awaking in modern-day New York City. All of this, and much more, is covered in the show's 5-part pilot, which basically constitutes a feature-length film that can totally stand alone. If you only take one recommendation from this video, go and binge those 5 episodes, it's so worth your time. Legendary voice and screen actor Keith David plays the Gargoyles' leader Goliath, and brings a suitable amount of gravitas to the role.
It is the nature of humankind to fear what they do not understand. Their ways are not our ways.
Oh, I just love his booming, purring voice. It's like listening to a V8 engine read King Lear. Star Trek The Next Generation and Beyond Belief Fact or Fiction's very own Jonathan Frakes twirls his Riker beard as the villainous David Xanatos, while Marina Sirtis joins her Next Generation co-star as the complex anti-villain Demona. If I'm being honest, this show totally went over my head as a kid. I love the action and the aesthetic, but I wasn't exactly au fait with Shakespeare and medieval Scottish history. As an adult though, oh man, I am totally obsessed with Gargoyles. It's something I started diving into during the pandemic when Disney Plus first hit, and I just fell in love with it. It's really no surprise to me that this show has developed such a cult following and dedicated online fanbase, and I'm happy to count myself as one of their numbers now. But when it comes to picking my favourite cartoon of my childhood, I can and ah about Gargoyles, or Batman, or the X-Men, but I'd be lying if I said anything other than Spider-Man. What can I say? Spider-Man's just my guy. I know it's not necessarily the cool choice, I know it makes me a bit of a basic bro, but there it is, and I've come to terms with it. By the time the show premiered on Fox Kids in November 1994, Spider-Man had the benefit of 2 years of Batman and X-Men to help set its tone. Spider-Man combined the moody aesthetic of Batman with the multi-episode arcs and rapid-fire pacing of X-Men to create a version of the webbed wall crawler unlike anything seen before on TV. But what it didn't benefit from was following Batman's boundary-pushing use of realistic guns and the karate-kicking action of the popular Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and Spider-Man is infamous for its heavy censorship. This resulted in changes like Morbius the Living Vampire drinking plasma instead of blood and using his way more creepy handsuckers, as well as the Sinister Six being renamed the Insidious Six. Producer and head writer John Semper Jr. once shared a censor note that had come from broadcast standards and practices, which stated, "Be careful that when Spider-Man lands on the roof, he doesn't harm any pigeons." Now, in the interest of being fair and balanced, John Semper Jr. now insists that Spider-Man wasn't subject to any stricter censorship than any other Saturday morning kids cartoon of the day. But also in the interest of being fair and balanced, Semper Jr. is now a full-on AI slopper and deleted a bunch of valuable Spider-Man the Animated Series resources like cast reunion panels and behind-the-scenes interviews from his own YouTube channel to make way for the most odious Gen AI cartoon about a dog detective named Sherlock Whippet. So, you know, credibility. Oh, Sherlock Whippet isn't even a pun. It should have been Sherlock Bones. My God, man, it was right in front of you. Anyway, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, Spider-Man 94 is a pretty faithful adaptation of the character, with all of the classic ingredients you know and love. Peter Parker is an Empire State University student moonlighting as a photographer for the Daily Bugle to help out his dear old Aunt May. Meanwhile, he balances superheroics with his social life, with best friend Harry Osborn and love interests Felicia Hardy and Mary Jane Watson. It's a tale as old as time, brought to life by the inimitable Christopher Daniel Barnes, who I would argue is to Spider-Man as Kevin Conroy is to Batman. 30 years later, and his is still the voice I hear when I read the comics.
So long now. I've tried to be there for everyone. Tried to live up to the responsibility that comes with this great power.
Just as Batman the Animated Series made great use of the Dark Knight's villains, Spider-Man plumbed the depths of the character's rogues gallery. From the top-level guys like the Green Goblin and Dr. Octopus, Venom of course, and the aforementioned Insidious Six, all the way down to the C, D, and Z listers from the comics. The show ran for 65 episodes across 5 seasons, and the Villain of the Week format afforded even the most obscure baddies a chance in the limelight, as evidenced by the fact that Morbius becomes a main and recurring antagonist, despite only having had a handful of comic book appearances up to that point.
Morbius? You can't be serious!
Dead serious.
As the show progressed, more of these offbeat comics characters started to appear. I made a video all about the episode featuring The Spot, and it seems that Semper Jr. was taking inspiration from the comic books he had grown up reading in the 70s and 80s. And by the final season, the stories were getting more and more ambitious, culminating in the 2-part Spider Wars, which featured everything from interdimensional travel to a water-cloned Mary Jane, and a 4th wall break so wild that I'm still reeling from it 3 decades later.
Gee, you're definitely not the same guy I've been writing about all these years.
Well, Stan, we all have to grow up sometime, I suppose. Even us characters of fiction.
Oh yeah, and it arguably invented the concept of the Spider-Verse. You know, I think I saw a YouTube video about that once. Wow, this video really is just me replaying my greatest hits.
And now spawn, so turn off your lights.
One of these things is not like the others. If you've made it this far into the video, you might be puzzled by my inclusion of HBO's Spawn, a show that is extremely not intended for children. So why am I talking about it here alongside the likes of Biker Mice from Mars and Street Sharks? Well, we started with Batman the Animated Series, and I feel like Spawn is the perfect bookend. It picked up the gauntlet laid down by the Caped Crusader, a moody, big-budget, beautifully animated superhero jaunt, and just went hell for leather. Speaking of hell, Todd McFarlane's Spawn comic was hotter than hell in the 90s, its debut issue selling 1.7 million copies to become the highest-selling independent comic of all time. So it's no surprise that it would be adapted for film and television. More on the film in a second, but while Spawn's Image Comics stablemates like Wildcats and Savage Dragon were being adapted into Saturday morning kids cartoons, old Toddy Mac wanted to take his baby in a different direction.
Let me tell you, David, who I am. Everybody goes to the left, I go to the right. Do I think that the right's better than the left? Of course not.
By the way, if you haven't seen the Big Mac's recent guest appearance on David Dasmalchian's Grave Conversation show on YouTube, you are missing out on some wonderful Toddisms.
They go left, I go right. The moment they go right, I go left. You know why? I don't want to be part of the group. That's why I've never seen Cats.
I f***ing love Todd McFarlane, man. He's the Michael Scott of comics. So I've often seen Todd talk about wanting to achieve the 4 pillars of Spawn back in the 90s. This was how he believed he could make Spawn a household name. And those 4 pillars were film, TV, toys, and video games. In 1997, the Spawn toy line had already been running for 3 years, pioneering the emerging adult collectible market. Spawn the Eternal was released for the PlayStation, the Spawn movie starring Michael Jai White released to cinemas, and a new Spawn animated series started airing on HBO. 1997 was truly the year of Spawn, and to be honest, on reflection, the HBO show was far and away the best thing to come out of McFarlane's big multimedia push. Although, to be honest, I have a soft spot for the movie, especially the soundtrack album that accompanied it, but I think it's fair to say that the film wasn't a hit by any metric. The animated series, meanwhile, running for 18 episodes across 3 seasons, was much more warmly received by both fans of the comics and the more hip and discerning crowd that HBO had been targeting in the 90s, with programs like The Larry Sanders Show and later The Sopranos. Given that HBO was a cable network, and with Spawn's late-night broadcast time, the show was allowed to be R-rated. It was violent, bloody, and full of shits, fucks, and great big Wait, can I say that on YouTube? In the comics, Todd McFarlane's hyper-detailed, noodly art style had been a huge part of Spawn's appeal. But if you know anything about how traditional animation works, there's just no way they were ever going to be able to put all of that cross-hatching and feathering into motion. So the show opted for a cleaner, much more minimal art style. There's definitely a big anime influence in there, as well as some European flavour, but I think the biggest efficiency that the show made was just by covering everything with shadows. Spawn is almost always cast in shadow, just these 2 glowing green eyes peering out from within a big red cape. Visually, it's a totally different approach to the comics, and yet it's a perfect fit for the character. The first season of the show adapts the first handful of issues of the comics, and like we talked about with X-Men, it does a really good job of asking what worked, what didn't, what has become iconic, and turning that into the purest distillation of Spawn. You can mainline Spawn with this show. Al Simmons is an ex-military covert assassin who is betrayed by his government and killed by his best friend. Upon dying and going to hell, he makes a pact with the devil Malbolgia, basically trading his soul to become a soldier in Malbolgia's army. In exchange, he gains superpowers and the ability to return to Earth to see his widow, Wanda. But when you make a deal with the devil, there can be hell to pay. And when Simmons awakes on Earth, he finds that 5 years have passed, Wanda has married his best friend and they have a child together, and his body is charred and maggot infested. On top of that, he has to deal with one of Malbolgia's minions, a demonic clown monster named Violator, who has been sent to keep tabs on the new Hellspawn. And just like in the comics, there's a lot of brooding in alleyways, philosophizing about good versus evil, and of course big spikes, bigger capes, and even biggerer guns. Keith David, who you might remember as the voice of Goliath in Gargoyles, lends his hot rod, fuel-injected voice as Al Simmons, aka Spawn. And in a way, it's a similar role to Goliath, except he gets to say f*** a lot.
Look! Back off, before I permanently introduce your face to your colon.
When Spawn got released on home video, the seasons were edited down into 3 2-hour-long movies, essentially. That's what you'll get if you buy the show on DVD, and I think they might even be on YouTube. They were on here for years. But I highly recommend tracking down the full individual episodes so that you can luxuriate in everything that this show has to offer, and it has to offer a lot. Oh my god, I almost forgot to mention the Tales from the Crypt style intros in which Todd McFarlane, dressed in black, and to be honest, with all the charisma of a teenager interviewing for his first supermarket job, repeatedly reminds us that he is, in fact, Todd McFarlane, creator of Spawn, and then asks us weird hypotheticals like, let me ask you something, have you ever been brought back from the dead only to find out that you've been cuckolded by your wife and best friend? You know, what am I doing? And like what? Are we supposed to believe that multi-millionaire comics artist Todd McFarlane's home office is a spooky castle dungeon? What's going on here? I've got some flack from hardcore Spawn fans for saying this in the past, but what I really love about Spawn is that it completely lacks self-awareness. It's the most try-hard, edgy, ooky spooky, and ultimately campy stuff. But Todd McFarlane and a lot of Spawn fans like to insist that it's a serious grown-up comic for serious grown-ups. And yet, it appears to have been engineered specifically to appeal to 12-year-olds. But I genuinely love that. That's what I love about it. Self-aware superhero stories suck. That's how you get the Joss Whedons and the MCUs of the world, because self-awareness often equates to self-consciousness. But Spawn is unapologetic in presenting itself as the coolest shit in the world. And you know what? For that reason, it just might be. Spawn to me is like the Undertaker of comics. It's allowing yourself to get swept up in the idea that a guy who killed his entire family in a fire and can summon lightning and trap souls in a magic urn has somehow ended up working as a professional wrestler alongside like an adult movie star and an ex-karate champ, despite the fact that what you're clearly looking at is a big ginger dude with a bad dye job and an even worse fake teardrop tattoo. Both Spawn and The Undertaker do their supernatural stick, but play it 100% straight, and that makes the goofiness of it all the more endearing. That being said, I think the Spawn cartoon does achieve a level of, dare I say, maturity and depth of storytelling that has always eluded the comics, and it certainly wasn't present in the film. And while shows like Biker Mice and Street Sharks, even X-Men and Spider-Man, were shamelessly designed to sell toys, McFarlane was already selling a buttload of Spawn toys at this point, so I think his whole holistic approach to building his Spawn empire is evident in the final product here because it doesn't feel as cynical as some of those other cartoons. It feels a lot more punk rock in that way. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. It's as scrappy and rough around the edges as the comics on which it was based. But is it worth your time? 2 words. Hell, yes. You know, hell, like Hellspawn, he spawns from hell. Yeah. Whew! Batman, X-Men, Biker Mice from Mars, Street Sharks, Gargoyles, Spider-Man, and Spawn. These are the most nostalgic cartoons of my childhood, and I'd love to know what your favourite is, so let me know down in the comments below. And if you said Spider-Man, I'm going to have to recommend my video called When Spider-Man Couldn't Miss, which covers the period from the 1994 cartoon to the 2000 video game, and the first Sam Raimi film in 2002, and why I think Spider-Man media was just firing on all cylinders at that time. You can check that video out by clicking the link on screen now, and I will see you over there.